Welcome back, ISHTUers. On today's episode, Carlos shares with us a story of a call that went well, and we talk about role playing. I know. If you're tempted to hit next, stick around because sales is a Broadway musical, and you got to know your freaking lines. How do we do that? Role play.
Straight from the heart of Miami, this is It Shouldn't Happen to Us. After 30 years of selling and training sales teams, we still screw it up sometimes. And this is where we tell you all about it, because it shouldn't happen to us. Sophia, you rock star. How are you?
I'm just standing. How you doing? Having my best year yet, right?
Having my best year ever, isn't it? And I love that expression. I'm dandy. You don't hear that enough.
Right.
What have you been? I was gonna ask, what have you been doing? But I know what the answer is. The answer is I've been selling some. I've been leading the team. I've been training some clients.
I've been doing a lot of call reviews.
What's that?
I've been having a ball. I've been doing a lot of call reviews, which is it's a valuable exercise. You can learn a lot. Every call should be recorded, listeners. What about you, Carlos? Tell me about that meeting.
I had a sales. So for our listeners, for ISHTUers out there, I want to. You know what? I'm going to tell you about what I've been doing, but I do want to come back to something you just said in a minute, because you just said you've been doing call reviews, and I want to talk about how amazing it is to do call reviews. But Sophia asked me about a sales call that I had, an important sales call this morning. Do you know, it was cool. And let me tell you, it occurred to me that it had every potential to not be cool, right? Because here's the thing. For ISHTUers, you don't know me, but I have a natural curiosity for business. I love talking to business people. I love talking to sales guys. I love talking to sales leaders. Just love talking to business people and sales leaders. And I get so much energy from it that when I jump into a Zoom with like a prospect, not like a prospect, with a prospect, when I jump into a Zoom with a prospect, honestly, we could be talking, or an hour and a half could skip by, and I'm only just getting going on like asking questions about the company and having a great conversation about business. Here's what was cool. In the past, that conversation would have run for about 45 minutes before I'd have figured out how to get control of it, because it's like the Jack in the Box. Like there are bits coming out of the top, and I'm trying to cram it back in the box, and I don't really know how to do it with and keep it conversational. And that was 10 years ago. That's what it would have looked like. I'd have either have been so inept at selling that I'd have just made it a conversation, and I'd have just kind of crossed my fingers and hoped that the prospect falls in love with me, which sometimes happened and sometimes didn't. If I was a little bit more skilled, I would have at least known that I've got to try and get this Jack back in the box, but it would have been clunky. But we role play this so much, right? That we were chat. I was like 3 or 4 minutes in. I was quite impressed with myself. Within 3 or 4 minutes, I thought, right, got to get this under control. And I just said, I said to the guy, hey, I want to be respectful of your time. Are you still good for the 90 minutes that we set aside today? So I set my time contract. I then went into, here's what I want to cover today. Then I went into, here's what you probably want to cover today. Took that level of control. And then, as we always teach our clients to do, we describe what's going to happen at the end of the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, right? So I'll say, here's where I'm hoping we're going to get to. And the conversation was instantly brought under control within 3 or 4 minutes. Wasn't natural. I'd have been happy, chat. But because I've practiced that so much, it was easy. And that's what I think is important here. What does Antonio always say? Practice makes permanent, right? Doesn't make perfect, but it makes it permanent. Don't you find that practicing something?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of how in theater, 80% of theater is rehearsal.
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing to read a talk track and talk about a talk track and learn a talk track than to practice it until you create that muscle memory. Because psychology says that when under pressure, aka when in front of the buyer, you will do what you've always done. So you can be reading books about how to sell, how to prospect, how to get your elevator pitch right. You could be taking courses about how to dig for pain, ask open-ended questions, and that's fabulous. But unless your ears hear your mouth run those questions, especially with someone on the other end to run it with you and give you feedback and respond to those questions, when you're there in front of the prospect, it's like falls right out of your head. All that information stays in your head. You get back in your car, or you leave the Zoom meeting thinking, what happened?
Do you know, what for you listeners, when we work with clients, what we often try to do is we'll establish a list of, and we call, I think we've got to come up with a better name for it, but we call them talk tracks. These are the talk tracks that you need to nail in this role, whatever that role is. You're selling software. These are the talk tracks. These are the things you've got to do. So here's the overall anatomy of your sales call. We'll give them that overall anatomy. We'll co-design that together. The overall anatomy, but then within each of the major elements, here are the things that you should just be great at. Like great. Should just, so you don't have to think about them. It's that quarterback on the field. If the quarterback is very well rehearsed, very well practiced in the plays, the quarterback doesn't need to devote much mental bandwidth to making a decision. They look up, instantly see the full field, and they know exactly, they make it, what is it they call it in the Air Force? It's that OODA, observe, decide. They decide instantly and then act. It's that OODA loop. Observe, process, I forget what those 4 letters are. There are 4 letters, the OODA loop. In the Air Force, they call it OODA loop. I think it's observe, and then you process the information, then you decide, then you act, and it happens in a microsecond. But if you're not rehearsed, if you're not prepped, and something comes out, and you've got to take that moment to make a decision, to think about how it's going to come out. All that training is just, like you say, it's going to stay in your head, right? How many times have you had a client who's like, oh, I've read that book, Sophia, I've read this book, and I've read this book, and I'm a rock star.
Great.
Read the book. Doesn't help.
Reading a book about climbing Mount Everest isn't the same as climbing Mount Everest, is it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So leaders listening, ISHTUers that are leaders, how often do you facilitate role play? What is the energy that you create in that role play room? Do your team start sweating? Does your team start sweating? Do they hate role play? It might be your fault, leaders, and I say that as a leader and with all the love in the world. But if it feels like it's an exercise of gotcha, I knew your elevator pitch was not great, or I knew that you get wimpy when it comes to questioning strategies, then your team's really not gonna love role playing sessions so much. So it needs to be light. The room needs to feel light. It needs to feel like a cushiony gym type environment. Supportive. If there's someone on your team that is snarky, shut that ish down right away. If there's someone that's laughing at someone else's talk tracks, or someone who's a little rusty, that's not good. We have to create a really cool, safe environment, because it is vulnerable. Because when you do a role play session, let's say it's on the first 5 minutes of a discovery call, you're going to discover hideous, archaic things that your people are doing
and saying.
And if you don't make it a cushiony learning environment, then they're going to run away. And so I believe that the right way to do it is you discuss what's going to be role played. The manager does it first, and then someone on the team does it. Then the manager does it again. Then that person does it again after feedback. And I think everyone should get a go. And I think role play should be scheduled. And I think it should be over time. It should be something that the team looks forward to. What do you think, Carlos?
I 100% agree. I was with a client about 2 weeks ago, and I said, right, guys, let's role play this thing. I can't remember. I think it was the first call. They have a business where it starts with one call, then it moves to a second and a third call. Let's role play the first call. It's typically a 5-minute call, if that. But there's some very important information needs to be gathered on that first call, and there's a very important energy flow that needs to be established, and there are some important messages that need to be communicated in that first call. So I said, let's do it, guys. Let's role play it. Let's role play it. I'll go first. So then I did it with cool. And I said, right, who wants to go? And it was like people were looking in the shoes.
Crickets,
the tumbleweed blowing through the office.
Yeah, stress, sweat activated.
Absolutely. And I'm like, guys, I was like, guys, the hell's going on? Who wants to do it? Let's do it. What's the worst that can happen? And one of the guys, it's like it fires. One of the guys says to me, Carlos, he said, I like to do it with clients. I like to do it in real time. I don't like doing it here in the role play, but I like to do do it there. And I went, well, wait a minute. Just understand what you just said. You like to practice with live ammo. That's what I think I heard you just say. That when there is a significant amount of money on the hook, that's when you like to do it. But when there's zero money on the hook, like we're just here, just your buddies, we're just together. When there's zero money on the hook, this is where you don't like to do it. You don't like to practice. The only thing at risk when we do it is your ego. It says something interesting that you're keener to risk money than risk ego. It says something about you. I need to think about that. We need to, as a group, think about that. Because as they say in the art of war, the more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. You practice. And like you say, Soph, it's not supposed to be perfect. There is no perfect.
It doesn't exist.
Perfect. It doesn't exist. So when you're saying to yourself, or you're about to go into some role playing and you think, oh, I don't want to do this. Why not? Is it because you're not going to be perfect? Guess what? I know already. No one's going to be. I'm not going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. I've got another thing that happened that day, but I want to know your thoughts on this. Why is it that people resist role play? What's going on?
I think it fires off the same parts of the nervous system that are afraid of speaking in front of a group. I think, what is it? I don't know how many statistics are made up on the spot? 87%.
Yeah.
Including this one. But I think it's like 80% of people would rather be buried alive than speak in front of a group of people. I think it's intimidating to be in front of your peers and reveal that your sales skills might not be so sharp. But our sales skills should really be updating all the time. The way we sold after COVID broke out was different. Selling on Zoom is different. Hybrid in person is different. Now that AI is the talk of the town, it has been. Our talk tracks are different. I mean, our talk tracks should be updating all the time, so they're never going to be perfect.
What is it? The one constant is change. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression, but
yes.
There's only one thing that you can absolutely be sure that's never going to change is that it's always going to change. That's the only thing that's never going to change. That everything's changing. So I'm reminded of Chris, who said, I think it's an Eric Hoffer quote, the world belongs to the learner. The learned man finds himself beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists. If you're not constantly practicing and upgrading the skills, you're very quickly out of date. You're very quickly obsolete. You know, it was COVID, like you say. Then it was Zoom. Then it was hybrid. Then it's AI. And I promise you there's going to be something after that. And I promise you there's going to be something after that. But the world's always going to need salespeople. The world's always going to need somebody who is really good at communicating and challenging and helping people get to great decisions. It's got extraordinary human value, quite apart from the extraordinary commercial value that goes along with those skills. Practice. There are some things that you should be able to say and do without any thought at all. It's reflex. And then there are other things which require a role-playing partner. Now, what should one of our ISHTUers do, Soph, if they're in a team that doesn't, then maybe they're not the leader. Maybe they're in a sales team that doesn't embrace role play, or maybe they own their own business and they're everything. They're the salesperson, the chief cook, they're everything. What should somebody like that do?
Find a buddy in a networking group. Find a mentor who's willing to role play with you. Role play with your kids. Role play with your partner. Find someone who will role play with you. Guys, sales is a Broadway musical put on by psychiatrists. And to not know your lines is amateurish. Ouch. But it is. Know your freaking lines. If you log off of every sales Zoom meeting thinking, damn, I should have said X, Y, and Z. Guys, let's be real. You're getting the same 10 to 12 objections and stalls every day. They're really not, it's not like a plethora. You're not getting stumped by a plethora of stalls and objections. Your sales call should have a flow to, your sales process should have a flow to it, from hello, nice to meet you, to getting that signed letter of engagement or disqualifying them and putting them in your 30-day file. It shouldn't be so different every time. If you're shooting from the hip every time, That's a whole other issue. But that process and those stalls and objections, you should have that in the bag. You should be expecting the prospect to tell you to sharpen your pencil. You should be expecting your prospect to break upfront contracts. You should be expecting them to use wishy-washy language when they tell you they're going to introduce you to their buddy and give you a referral. You should be expecting these things because you're getting them every day, and you should practice how to. I don't like the word combat because that implies that sales is a fight. Although we might argue that it is a battle of beliefs, but you should be ready to respond and not react, because if you haven't role played, you are reacting from an place of ego versus responding from a place of peace and calm.
The thing is, what do we always tell our clients, Soph? It is a fight, but your enemy ain't the prospect. The enemy is your habits, your ego. So you fight. It's like a game of golf. You're not playing the other player. You're playing your own skill set when you play golf, right? You're playing golf, and really it's a battle of you against you. Sales is the same. It's a battle of you against you. It is certainly not an arm wrestle or a battle with the prospect. Prospect's your ally. You've got to know, and this is such a great example you gave. How many ISHTUers, how many times do you hear something like, well, you're going to have to sharpen your pencil to get this deal? Something like that. There's 5 things you'll hear generally. You've got to sharpen your pencil. We haven't got budget for that. This is more expensive than we thought it was going to be.
I'm going to speak to my partner.
Now then you've got the objection that says that essentially is, can I have a discount in disguise? There are those objections. Then you've got stalls. I need to speak to my partner. Hey, this was
I need to speak to a fictitious board. Now there's some board. They never mentioned a board. Now there's a board they got to talk to.
So there's those stalls. There's a bunch of things we're going to meet. It's going to sound a little different, but it's essentially the same thing. Now, as a skill, when there are millions of dollars, and I am not exaggerating that, there are millions of dollars on the hook. Don't you think you should have 5 arrows in your quiver so that you're ready, like Hawkeye? You don't know which of these arrows you need. Don't know what's quite a fit, but I've got 5 different ways to respond to. You've got to sharpen your pencil. I've got 7 different ways to respond to. Hey, I need to talk to my partner about that, or I need to talk about some other fictitious. I've got to go and take this into Narnia and do an analysis. Or you've got to have, have I got my 6 ways of handling competitive quote? Hey, we're getting 3 more quotes. So I got my 6 ways, so that without even thinking, without even looking down at my quiver, like Hawkeye in the Avengers, my hand just goes and picks out the right arrow, knowing who I'm dealing with, what the energy is like, what the personality style is that I'm wrestling with at the moment, that I'm dancing with at the moment. Let's use the word dancing, right? I'm dancing with someone at the moment. Do I know their style? Do I know their energy? Does it fit with how we got to this particular issue? And I've got 6 arrows, and I don't even have to think about it. Without a reflex, the right arrow comes out of the quiver, and that's my talk track. That is hard to do. It's hard to get to that level of proficiency, but it's absolutely you are able to do it without a shadow of a doubt. That is, you have got the ability to build that. And it comes out of continuous practice for sure. But more than that, it comes out of a culture of continuous practice, continuous development. So if
your company doesn't have it, create your own culture within yourself. Get a coach. Find someone who will role play with you.
That culture is so important. And we know we've got clients who engage with us because they're ticking a box. Hey, the boss says I need to get some training in. Hey, we'll get that. Sophia and Carlos, they're pretty cool cats. Let's get those in. They've ticked a box, but they're not really after establishing a culture of radical change. They're not establishing a culture of high performance, like a high performance team. That isn't what they're trying to do. With those guys, we have a fun time together. We tick the box and everybody's happy. But and I know, Soph, we've got those clients where what they're really trying to do is establish a culture of change, a culture of success, a culture of consistent development. And and I know, Soph, those guys over a period of 3-4 years, they will 2x, 3x 3x, 4x, 5x their revenue line. And it's the same people coming and helping. Carlos and Sophia, we've got a big team. We bring the same resources. Are we trying to create a culture of continuous change, continuous development, or are we trying to tick a box? Same guys are showing up, and we'll help you, and we'll coach you, and we'll try and help you make great decisions. But you don't need us, by the way. What Sophia said was right. You need a mentor, you need a partner, and it's an everyday event. It's 10 minutes every day, or it's half an hour every week. Ideally 10 minutes every day. Role play. Magic things happen.
Carlos, champions are brilliant at the basics.
Oh, I've forgotten who said that. It's
John Wooden.
It's Wooden. It's John Wooden. You're dead right. Champions are brilliant at the basics. Let's get the basics right, guys, and we'll start with and we'll start to create some sales.
Hey, the first basic you can get right is subscribing to the ISHTU channel. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your morning commute on Spotify or Apple, or you're on a trot around the neighborhood, hit that subscribe button. That's the first basic to get in check. And then right after you log off, why don't you find yourself a role-playing partner and schedule 10 whole minutes of role play, working those muscles. Because if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you.
Boom, mic drop
Boom.
From Sophia. Boom, so ISHTUers have a great week selling. It's goodbye from Sophia.
And goodbye from Carlos. Thanks for listening.